Welcome to the June 22nd Special Board of Education meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Jen, can you take roll for us, please?
President Roush.
Here.
Vice President McFarland. Not here. Secretary Ringgold is here. Treasurer Lauterbach. Here. Member Blasey.
Here.
Member Craig.
Here.
Member Horowitz.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Anybody, item number 2 is request to address the board. Anybody like to address the board? Okay. Item 3, Board of Education matters, presentation of the board from Anna on the approval of the 26-27 general operating budget.
Phil, if I could just chime in quick while Anna's getting queued up. First off, thank you everyone for convening today for this special board meeting so that we can address questions that you might have about the budget. At our last meeting, we talked about the importance of having a budget approved before July 1. We recognize that there was some confusion from the budget workshop to the final presentation of the budget, and Anna has done a nice job of putting together an explanation of that along with a little bit sharper detail about our current status, and then looking for some dialogue about how we move forward from here. So thank you.
There we go. All right, sorry about that. All right, so we are going to get into kind of a revised 26-27 budget presentation. Why we're revisiting the budget today is providing clarity on some of our key financial points within here, looking at the translation of the budget workshop assumptions into the final numbers that you're seeing in the 26-27 budget proposal, the drivers behind changing revenue and expenditure lines, as well as focusing on how we are utilizing strategic drawdowns versus our long-term fiscal sustainability. So looking at how we got here with a goal on reconciling the initial budget workshop estimates with the 26-27 budget proposal, want to kind of go over our budget development timeline again. We talk a little bit about this in every budget presentation of kind of where we've been, where we're at, but trying to bring a little bit more detail into here. So in March is when we bring to you a budget amendment, which is our updated budget assumptions to align with the latest fiscal and operational data. In April is when we have that budget workshop for you, where we review our historical trends, our benchmarked district performance, as well as establishing initial budget assumptions based off what we have in our March budget amendment. May to June is our development phase, where we collaborate with our buildings and our departments to set our budget targets, as well as our staffing allocations. June was the proposed budget, where we provided budget recommendations to you based on the current known factors and forecast. Again, this is quite difficult as we don't have a state budget at this point. And that brings us to today, where we are at reconsideration, providing enhanced clarity and context on our budget development and assumptions to you. So talking about the budget workshop a little bit more, the budget workshop is really designed to kind of be exploratory. It evaluates our preliminary scenarios, and it's not locked in operational spending. We're testing our early projected enrollment limits here. We're utilizing draft legislative proposals, which at the time of the budget workshop this year, we only had the governor's budget, didn't have the Senate or the House at that point. And we're modeling general staffing estimates, but again, we haven't gone through our staffing workshops at that point and haven't really nailed down anything. So the key takeaway from the budget workshop is that the workshop's not a final budget. It's just initial scenarios that are serving as early planning frameworks, not fixed realities. We continuously refine these projections from the workshop to the point that we bring you a proposed budget to align with the most current detailed estimates on enrollment, any legislative impacts that we know of, as well as our expenditure needs. So wanting to just kind of go back to what we showed you in that budget workshop, looking at the initial outlook of the general fund revenues, we were predicting at that point a $1.5 million change in general fund revenue, so a $1.5 million increase from what we had in March. Looking at the expenditures, we were showing about an $8.5 million change, so again, an $8.5 million increase from what we had in March. To kind of put that into a little bit more graphical format, our March amendment shortfall was at $9.9 million. The workshop revenue changes added $1.5 million of revenue. The expenditures were $8.5 million, which led to a $16.9 million shortfall based on what we showed you in the budget workshop. We told you at that point that we would go back, we would sharpen our pencils, and we did just that. So from our budget workshop shortfall of that $16.9 million, we were able to go through the budget, have refinement within there, up our forecast, and get $1.7 million back into the budget, showing a projected shortfall in the 26-27 budget of 15.2. So again, a $1.7 million improvement over our workshop projections. So looking a little bit more to why our 26-27 budget looks the way it does, want to go into a little bit more of the factors behind the budget. So looking at fiscal year 27, wanted to provide for you a little bit of a revenue bridge from where we are projecting to end within the 25-26 June amendment at that $113.8 million, and how we got to the $106.5 million we're showing in the fiscal year 27 proposed revenues. So within here, we are showing a slight increase of that $250 per pupil allowance, which gave us a $1.8 million increase in revenue. However, we did see decreases, $0.4 million from enrollment decline, $0.7 million from MPS changes, $0.8 million from 31AA, $1.1 million from federal grants, and then miscellaneous revenue changes throughout. Again, a reminder on those federal grants. Our grants are budgeted at only 85% due to the cycle of federal grants being from October 1st to September 30th and having initial funding uncertainty, as well as a lot of categorical uncertainty. Without having a state budget, we have a lot of uncertainty regarding inclusion of things like 31AA, some of our MPS offsets, enrollment stabilization, that really impacts our core revenue. Looking at our core expenditure drivers, a reminder that 84% of our total outlays goes into that salaries, pension, and benefits. Staffing is really the heart of our budget, and since 84% of our spending supports people, major cuts can't be made without a direct impact to the workforce. The primary pressures within these areas are our contractual obligations, where we have scheduled collective bargaining adjustments, our step and lane movements for experienced instructional staff, benefit inflation. We are seeing premium growth within our health insurance, which is tracking alongside those national health markets, and there are MPS rates of our state-mandated retirement payments. Looking at a bridge from our general fund expenditures from our 25-26 June budget amendment of the $119.9 million to that fiscal year 27 proposed of $121.7, we're seeing $3.5 million in that commitment to staffing, $2.5 million in salaries, $1 million in benefits. We see an increase in transfers of that $0.4 million. That's really our cost for the Midland County ESA, which is driven by their salaries and benefits, so you could imagine an increase in there as well. And then what we collectively called BOB, Build Our Budget Savings. That's where we went back to our buildings and departments, asked them to really take a hard look at their needs versus wants, and we're able to have some trimming of about $1.5 million across supplies, purchase services, and capital layouts. Do want to point out within here that our focus really is making sure that our operating overhead is pushing downward to make sure that we're prioritizing our student-facing classroom services. Along with that statement, with our state-validated operational efficiency at the budget workshop, we do bring forward Bulletin 1014, which is put out by the Michigan Department of Education and really kind of benchmarks where we are at in comparison to other districts in the state. And that bulletin does indicate that MPS is not operating with top-heavy administrative structures. For administrative overhead spending, we are in the lower 15% statewide, meaning that we have extremely streamlined centralized staff count compared to state peer districts. Our business office services cost is also in the lower 12% statewide, meaning we have prudent utility of technical, operational, and system resources. And our instructional allocation focus is in that upper 20% statewide, meaning we're consistently putting our primary dollars into direct learning environments. Looking at the expenditure changes a little bit more granularly, wanting to go through where we're showing our ending 25-26 June budget amendment to that 26-27 proposal. Salaries, again, an increase of about $2.5 million, and benefits of an increase about $1 million. Purchase services are down about $305,000, contracted services down about $123,000, supplies down around $762,000, capital outlay down around $324,000. Our other areas, which have leases, gifts, other things miscellaneous within there, down around $539,000, and those outgoing transfers are increased around $389,000. All in all, from a comparison of our 26-27 proposed budget to our 25-26 June amendment, we're showing an increase of around $1.9 million, which is only a 1.6% year-over-year increase. Again, this 1.6% is not even keeping up with inflation. So why approval is recommended today to the board? It's helping to secure a stable transition using a calculated reserve utilizing approach within here. Looking at our fund balance, yes, we have seen it go down the past few years. However, these reserves were intentionally accumulated to be able to absorb transitional periods like the one we're in right now without falling below the board policy limit of 12%. So looking at that strategic fund balance spend down of how we're going from $31.9 million in the fiscal year 26 amended June budget, utilizing about 12.8 after variance within that fund balance to end with around 19.1 at the end of fiscal year 27. Those accumulated reserves, again, were meant to be able to absorb external funding cliffs, and that's why we've been building that healthy fund balance. It's helping us protect classrooms rather than forcing immediate severe personnel and course cuts to balance the loss of those categoricals, which we're estimating around $7.3 million. Those reserves are being intentionally stepped down, giving us a smooth transition from that 26.7 to 15.7%, which is allowing for methodical attrition adjustments rather than a crisis restructuring. And it's allowing us time to have strategic reanalysis of our staffing, program alignments, and enrollment retention as we look forward to fiscal year 28. Looking ahead of this multi-year planning and adjustment, we are in a period right now of proactive realignment. You'll notice within here we talk about it being from fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 28. Fiscal year 26, the year we are in right now, moving forward to the next year as well as the year after. This proposed general operating deficit represents a calculated safe transitional year, not an uncontrolled pattern. It allows the district to use reserve funds strategically while executing progressive operational adjustments. Our primary balancing strategy that we're focused on right now in fiscal year 28-26 as we move into fiscal year 27 and look ahead towards fiscal year 28 as well is attrition-based reductions where we're recapturing salary space as personnel leave without forced layoffs. We're doing continuous program audits to identify operational efficiencies and cost savings in our programs and services, as well as targeted enrollment focus of retaining and attracting students to support stable foundation funding, which again is why we were looking at the Midland Flex Learning Center to open next year to be able to help with that enrollment focus. Our recommended action today to the board is to approve the fiscal year 27 general fund operating budget to help ensure we have continuity of student services and district operations while providing time for the district to have thoughtful programmatic realignment. And then the FFO study committee will continue to have oversight here. We'll provide ongoing financial review and study to support fiscal sustainability, which we will regularly bring those updates back to the board. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Anna. Maybe I'll just say I really appreciate the additional information and insight. It's a clear walk from last school year to this school year, or this upcoming school year. It's clear to me that the team has really sought as much as possible to limit and cut discretionary expenses and focus on students first. I think the plan around, taking a 2-year view, especially around attrition, and only making replacements for staff where strategically necessary, is a good one. And it seems like, taking the conservative assumptions on the revenue side, while we don't have consensus on state budget at this time, makes a lot of sense. So thank you.
Anna, I echo Phil's sentiment. Appreciate you going back and giving us a bit more detail here. Can you explain one piece? So you say earlier in the presentation, you reference a $15.2 million deficit, and then you mentioned that the variance takes it to $12.8 million. Can you explain that?
Sure. I don't have it on this slide, but in the budget that you have before you to vote on, we know that we historically come in better than anticipated. That has to do with our conservative budgeting nature. And we tend to budget a 2% variance within there. So even though the initial difference between revenue and expenditures is around that $15 million, we build back into it 2% of our expenditures of adding back on, which in this budget would be around $1.2 million, is around 1%. So adding in about $2.4 million back in to that shortfall, which brings it from that 15-ish number up to that 12.8.
Thank you. As I mentioned, I agree with Phil that you guys went back and did well to reduce the expenditures so that we're very close to where we spent last year despite inflation. Unfortunately, the piece that we can't control is the revenue piece, which you're projecting will be significantly less than where we were this year. My concern, which was my concern a couple weeks ago or a week ago, is still that the deficit is significant, and the process that happened between April and June. Well, I appreciate, and maybe this is a question. Did FFO go through? Did they have this $16.9 million number in April, and then work through, take, I guess, a plan for strategy in terms of what we're going to do for next year? Was that something that was worked through in FFO?
That was not worked through in that level of detail at FFO. That's something Anna and I have talked about since. The timing of the budget development is, we need to adjust our timeline and sync up an FFO meeting in proximity to that. You subbed in at the last FFO meeting, and we didn't have this level of detail at that point, so the full board saw it all at the same time. Which is in part why this last slide reflects our need, Anna and I, to connect more closely with FFO as the study committee that monitors and provides oversight.
Okay. And I understand that we did know, though, and I could be wrong just from chatting earlier last week, we did know that the shortfall was going to be $16.9 million with the very early numbers that we had in April, but that wasn't made. So I appreciate the urgency of passing the budget and the I can't say that I disagree with the choice to be cautious about doing things that will impact the workforce, impact the classroom. I would like to see the type of work that was described in terms of just bringing this deficit down. I know traditionally, historically, we have been able to shrink that number in between because of the way that you budget conservatively. It's never been this large of a gap that's shrunk to zero, but certainly seeing that happen would be the expectation, and I know that you guys are going to continue to work on it. But going forward for next year, I would love to see the board engaged, whether it's just at FFO or in April when we're doing this budget workshop, earlier in the decision of it would be best to not reduce workforce, or it would be best to these sorts of policy decisions that are being made about the budget. I'd love to see the board engaged on those sooner. So I am, I know we're just discussing now, but I am prepared to move forward with this budget, but want to highlight those concerns.
Thanks for that feedback. Agree that this deficit is more than we have experienced in recent years in our district, and I want to assure, I'm looking at you, but I want to look at everyone. I want to assure each of you that we're taking this seriously, and I appreciate Phil's opening comments as well. We'll continue in this current fiscal year, in next fiscal year that will start here soon, to work in the right direction. Using an attrition model isn't going to get us there. And it's not going to get us there in fiscal year 28 either. This is really intentional, strategic planning, as Anna said, looking at programs with the support of Ken and Kara. A full plan is necessary, and you will have that from us.
But I think also it's important to note that we've already reduced headcount through attrition above and beyond what this budget shows, right?
Thanks for that. Yes, since this budget was locked in, correct me if I'm wrong, at 3 FTE total, since this budget has been locked in, that we have used our attrition model. Gone back, looked at staffing, looked at programs and services, and we'll continue to do that along with our supplies, materials, and other line items. Yep. Anne, I think you were going to say.
Yeah, so I don't want to use a really terrible phrase, beat a dead horse, but I did want to thank you for going back and preparing this. I think that this is really a nice supplement to what we've seen before. I think to Mackie's point, yes, we've done a good job refining thus far, but certainly you guys know from the last meeting and from conversations that we've had just individually since the last meeting that, I'm of the opinion that we need to keep pushing and looking really closely at what programming is effective, what our enrollment truly is, and having those really hard discussions together and sooner rather than later, because we absolutely cannot be in the same position next year. The other thing that I wanted to suggest is because we're in such a unique and unfortunate position right now, I would like to request that at all of our committee meetings that we have a quick budget update on where we are, just so that we are all on the same page, because obviously only 3 board members are on FFO, so it'd be nice to have those updates in between board meetings. Anna, thank you. Team, thank you very much again for putting this all together and going into the extra detail for us. I think one of the things that I would like to add
having watched MPS historically, right? The idea that we built that general fund up for such a time as this, right? Like we're at the same time as we're facing some of these revenue shortages, we're also trying some new things, right? Like we took a risk and we bought Fast Ice and we're doing the flex learning to try and be able to serve all of our students and keep them in district. So what we're looking at right now is in like the grand scheme of things, if you go back and you look at our like up and down of our general fund, like this is barely a blip. I mean, really, truly, in what we're looking at. And again, such an important time to be having conversations with our community about what it means to invest in our schools, right? We're sitting here making these decisions to do the very, very best that we can with the resources that we have. And yes, it looks a little scary, right? Going into this coming fiscal year, but at the same time, we're doing all of the things that we need to do. Right? We're keeping kids at the front. We're trying to maintain our staff and our staffing levels. If you go into any of our buildings, I don't think any of our staffs would tell you they even have enough people in the buildings to be meeting the needs of our kiddos. And I mean, when we go and we say we're going to cut $1.5 million from like what you want for classroom resources, like that to me is like, I'd rather spend that extra 1.5 Bob budget, right? Like I'd rather give our teachers what they need and be looking at 17 and meeting a 15 deficit. That's me personally, because that's where spending our money matters. And so, again, thank you all for this. And I trust that we're going to continue to do what we need to do to provide the best services that we can and not overspend in excessive ways, which we are not doing currently.
I echo the comments others have made. I just want to also offer some perspective. When I joined the board at the end of 2018, I don't remember the exact numbers, but our fund balance was right around 20 to 22% of our general fund operating budget. We had significant increases in funding during COVID and thereafter that allowed us to sock away some more money. So where we've kind of gotten it in our head that we have about a 30% or 30+% fund balance, that's kind of a narrow snapshot. And I think, you know, when I joined the board in 2018, we were very comfortable with a fund balance of in the low 20s or around 20, and we were considered a well-capitalized district, and obviously still are. So I'm comfortable with spending down the fund balance. I don't want to be below 18%. I mean, that to me that is an arbitrary number, but it's 150% of our board policy, and it still keeps us well within the range of well-capitalized. I'm sorry I wasn't here last week. I was out of town for work, or I would have voted in favor of the budget last week, and this meeting would have been unnecessary. But we're not going to stop. We're not going to vote on the budget and then just put it on a shelf and turn our backs on it. We're all committed, and certainly the FFO committee is committed to continuing to look at how we can right-size the budget. One thing to keep in mind as we go forward is our district was built for enrollment that is very different than our enrollment today. And a lot of the costs of operating are fixed because of the physical plant that we have that was built at a different time for different needs. And so, you know, there are things that we can do in the short term to right-size the budget, and they're going to be a little bit more drastic. And there are some things we can do in the long term to think about how to reshape the way the district looks and how our budget looks. But those are going to be choices that the community has to make, probably at the ballot box. So just to kind of foreshadow some things coming. But they all have direct impact on budgets and deficits and how money can be used to educate kids. So. That's all I have.
One thing. I think everything's been covered. One thing to keep in mind, we didn't talk about it directly, but indirectly, our investment in Fast Ice in our new school is to address keeping those students in-house. And the student count is the number one driver of the revenue. In looking at that, also in years 1, 2, and on into 3, before we see that pay for itself and get that return on investment. So it takes money to get that up and running, and that is shown in this budget as well. So we are investing in the kids, and it's going to take a little bit for that to pay for itself as well. So just as a point.
I just want to add, John, I'm glad that you weren't here so that we could have this meeting. And I appreciate that perhaps if you were here, if there were others who were here who were absent last time, we wouldn't have had it. But I think that for something as important as passing the budget, there's a lot of context that was added by you and by Jen and by others here today that the public doesn't have, that I may not have as a new board member, and to be able to discuss these things openly in the meeting and to understand where each of the board members is coming from on an issue as important as the budget, I think is critical. So while we always miss you when you're not here, John, I'm glad that we had this opportunity. And I also appreciate Anna's work in going back and understanding what it is that we needed to dig into and clarify. So I am glad that we are here today, and I'm sorry that it's in the morning on a Monday, but I appreciate it.
That is quite all right. Like I said last meeting, we're better because we've had this meeting, so. Is there a motion to approve item 3?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Lauterbach, support by Craig. Any further discussion or questions? All right, this does require a roll call vote. Jen?
Yeah. President Roush.
Yes.
Vice President McFarland is not here. Secretary Ringgold is a yes. Treasurer Lauterbach.
Yes.
Member Blasey.
Yes.
Member Craig.
Yes.
Member Horowitz.
Yes.
Budget passes.
Thank you all for the robust discussion and decision there. Item 4, study session. Are there any points of clarification or questions from any of the board members? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Penny.
Just one, which is thank you to Mecky's point. This was good to hear dialogue. I sort of knew where each of you sort of fall in these conversations. I came to the district in 2008, and I lived through a really rough financial period for us. That is burned in my brain. I take this very seriously, and I want to assure you of that. I also agree with Jen's comment that we do need to serve the students we have in front of us, coupled with what I think is your general sentiment of being wise about that. How do we use our fund balance to intentionally support the needs right now, but also safeguard our future? So look forward to future conversations about where we find that appropriate balance, and we will certainly engage the full board in updates along the way. Thank you for today.
Thanks, Penny. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So support.
Motion by Lauterbach, support by Ringgold. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned.